from the Western perspective, looking at the role of Islam and feminism and the way those two interact,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's different perspectives surrounding that. I think there is in America there is a kind of a conservative perspective that doesn't like feminism, that also sort of looks at feminism as picking on the West and is like, oh well, Islam is worse, so why are feminists so mad at white men when look, Islam is even worse to women. So there's a conservative perspective. There is
Mm-hmm.
a liberal perspective that accepts feminism, and then looks at Islam, as you said, as a kind of has a liberating aspect to it. That if a
Yeah.
woman is choosing to wear a headscarf, then she can still be a feminist.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to be an act of sexual repression. She can still, she's free to do what she wants, and so there's that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think there's also an aspect where the concept of modesty, which I think to me is what I understand the meaning of the headscarf, is about being
Yeah.
immodest. So the concept
Well,
of
yeah.
modesty is not like a foreign concept to Western culture. There is a concept of
Yeah.
modesty in Western culture, but it's something that has been progressively lost and undermined, and it's
Hmm.
very difficult for Westerners to look at that and to to deal with it and grapple with it like in an authentic way. Like you can't, like there's a concept, I guess, of like a shawl, or in Christianity nuns can wear head coverings, or when the bride is getting married she's supposed to wear a head covering. Like, so there's a concept of modesty in the West that it's hard to get back. Like, it's hard to put on clothing that is modest and do that in a way that feels and looks authentic, and like you're doing something. Because I mean, you can dress up in like an old style of clothing, but is that really authentic, or are you putting on a costume? Is it a living, breathing culture, or is it at this point just sort of a costume that
Hmm.
people don't take seriously? So I think there's some interesting perspectives surrounding that. Um, I can definitely, I can try to work with, I guess, when people in America, because America is um, very politically divided in a lot of ways. I try to meet people where they are, try to figure out what are their standards and what are their limits, and what rules do they operate under, and I try to, I guess, meet them where they are, because it's so to I find that to come to a common ground, you have to have a common authority.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
increasingly, I feel like the common authorities, it's harder to find those. It's hard to say, well, we both go to the same place of worship, or uh, we both share the same history, or we both
Hmm.
share the same culture or something. It's harder to point to those things and say, well, we are under the same authority. And if you don't have a sense of shared authority, it's really hard to agree on almost anything. Um, so, what I would say is essentially, um, navigating that. I mean, what do you? It sounds to me like the university culture in Canada and being situated in that. I guess to me, I kind of see aspects of what you're talking about, and I agree with aspects of what you're talking about. Like, I think that there is a tradition in the Greek tradition in philosophy that says essentially we have passions, and if you allow your passions to rule your life, you're enslaved by your passions. So there's a truth to saying, if you moderate yourself, if you control yourself, if you are modest, then you are actually liberated because you're freed from your passions. So I agree with that to an extent. but I also feel that much of modern liberalism and feminism is about, you only live once and do whatever you feel like doing, and find your passion is a really big motto that you hear. Find your passion. You need to find out what you're passionate about. So there are a lot of conflicting messages. So I guess there are elements where I'm like, oh, I see what you're saying. I agree with some of what you're saying. But I also feel like it's really hard to, like when you say something like the hijab is not sexually repressive, I'm like, well, maybe there are cases where sexuality should be repressed or sexuality needs to be repressed. And the concept of repression as a negative thing, it's like, yes, it is mutually exclusive. Like you can either be sexually free and deal with the consequences, or you can be sexually repressed, and also you have to deal with that responsibility. So I don't know. There's a lot of there are these words that they have this weight associated with them that you can't get around. And so it's very hard when our language is controlled in this way by an exterior discourse. We can't discuss these things without having to redefine words or come up with alternative words. Oh, it's not oppression, it is self-control or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Freud said that repression is the source of civilization, that by repressing our violent nature, we can cooperate.
Yeah.
So, I guess it's how we define the discourse is not decided by you or me. There's always a third person in the room, which is society and culture and media and things like that. So those are my thoughts.
Are you familiar with Edward Sapir or Whorf, like the Sapir-Whorfian hypothesis?
I've heard of Sapir-Whorf. Certain thoughts of an individual cannot be understood. Yeah, I'm more familiar, I guess, with Chomskyan linguistics, which talks about how, the origin of formulated arguments against linguistic relativity are associated with Noam Chomsky. So yeah, I'm more familiar with
the Chomskyan view of linguistics.
Yeah. So what is your perspective on these two linguistic theories?
I really need to. I really can't remember what Noam Chomsky was saying. He's a cognitive linguist, right?
Well, see, it's funny because I thought Chomsky's theory about linguistics, and I guess I'll look this up now, but I thought his theory was that essentially.
Oh, I remember. Yes, the innate grammar theory that we all understand how language is the basis of human development. He has the universal grammar.
Generative.
I recall this from philosophy. Yeah. Well, I mean, they kind of talk about different things, like Edward Sapir and Chomsky. I actually think what you're mentioning is more the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis rather than or Sapir-Whorf.
Yeah.
I call him Edward Sapir. But what you're saying is really interesting because I think that's the fundamental basis of Islam. Because the idea behind the hijab, or like a lot of things in Islam, is that humans need structure and need discipline in order to be successful. And it's normal to have feelings of jealousy or feelings of envy or feelings of entitlement. But these are all feelings that you need to control and you need to discipline yourself not to have. And there's going to be times where you mess up, but obviously ultimately your goal is to be self-disciplined and exhibit like a high level of self-control. The word Islam itself actually means submission. A lot of people think it means peace. It does mean peace as well. Like it comes from, like it has a similar root word to peace, but it means submission. And so the idea behind Islam is that once you submit yourself, like we're all enslaved to something at the end of the day. You can be enslaved to the idea of like what makes us live, right? Like what gives you purpose to your life? Like what do you live for, kind of a thing. And so, like for some people, that may be like financial gain. For others, it may just be like this sense of like finding your passion or finding your purpose in life, and then doing something, and that's it. Some people just live for the fun of it. Um, and so with Islam, the idea is you live for like your Lord or like God. And ultimately it's not like a YOLO attitude. It's more like you live this life is like a very small fraction of what is to come. Like you have 90 years on earth, but there's like an eternity in an afterlife that you're trying to build and like get to. And so the concept is this life is just meant to be, I guess, not really like just a small test to see whether or not you're willing to discipline yourself and hold on the things you really wanted so that you can reap the rewards of something greater. Like it's kind of like short term, have you ever heard, like there's one of my favorite quotes is like, in life you have to pick between between two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And so the whole purpose of Islam is you submit yourself to this God and you follow all the rules of the religion in an effort to be disciplined and in an effort to suppress all these like negative, like jealousy, like and any of the like sort of negative human traits that we are inherently all have in us, so that you can live like a productive life that serves like the world, that benefits society and benefits your Lord, and then ultimately reap the benefits, even if you don't get many benefits from living like a humanitarian or very like a self-sacrificing life here, that those rewards will be compensated in like the hereafter. And so the concept of hijab, or like the headscarf, is modesty. But in Arabic, there's two words for modesty. There's haya and then there's ihtisham. So ihtisham basically just means like physically modest. And then haya means like a kind of modesty that is like a humility. Which is the kind of modesty that, you are the kind of person that, you don't flaunt it, you don't show off, you don't try to like when you see someone's a modest person, like a very like self-regulated, they're modest in their spendings, they're not frivolous, they're not extravagant, they're just a very humble, sort of grounded person. And so the purpose of hijab is that so there's two words, remember, two words for modesty, like this ihtisham, which is like the physical modesty, like an outer modesty, and then hayat, which is like an inner modesty. Ultimately, the thing in Islam that you have to gain is hayat, like that inner modesty. But the idea is, if you put on a front, like a headscarf or something that physically represents modesty, it can cultivate that inner modesty, because it's a reminder. Like there's this physical reminder every single time that I wake up, when I put this on, that my purpose and goal is not to appease to my desires. My purpose and ultimate goal is to please my Lord, and to like there's a bigger purpose to my life than just like this temporary satisfaction that XYZ things could give me. And so there's many things in the religion that are like that. There's many things that you do in the religion that you don't really in themselves have some inherent social benefit, but really the true benefit to it is that it cultivates this relationship with your Lord that is greater than the actual social benefits of hijab. So we can say that the purpose of hijab is for physical modesty and like to like not show off your body, etc., like sexuality, but I think that's like just a part of it. The bigger picture behind like wearing the headscarf or praying 5 times a day, or doing all the like fasting a whole 30 days, like these are really, sure, there's some like physical health benefits to fasting, but really like it's, if you think about it, it's kind of pointless for like temporary gain. Like really, this isn't. I mean, sure, it's like a like I gain some social benefit to not having people like sexualize my body, but that isn't the actual purpose behind it. The actual purpose behind it is to cultivate those bigger inner like feelings of connection to something that's greater, that makes you totally humble and submissive to a power that isn't like temporary, or something that isn't um, like self-serving.
Yeah. Um, that's something, I guess I hear this, and it's just not something. It's difficult for me because I guess it's not something I would ever hear a young woman say unless she was, devoutly religious. And one of the things about the West is the religion of the West for quite a while now has been Christianity, and that is, by all accounts, not just declining but becoming alien from the rest of society.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of it's becoming weird to be a Christian, and it doesn't have that idea where in the West there is a concept of tolerance that goes back for quite a while,
Mm.
and this notion of tolerance often means, um, if something is new or something is foreign, or it's a minority religion or it's different in some way, then you tolerate it to an extent. Whereas if it's something familiar and you disagree with it, then I think people tend to be harsher toward it. So there's
Mm.
kind of this internal crumbling of the concept that you're talking about really a hierarchy between man and the metaphysical, or woman and the metaphysical, but the humanity and that which is above humanity. The very concept of humanism, the idea that really there's only humanity, all that we can do is improve ourselves internally, or
Mm-hmm.
like Nietzsche would say, the man must become a superman.
Yeah.
We have to go beyond humanity through in ourselves, rather than by
Mm.
being humble. We have to do it by being arrogant and by
Yeah.
being, so that sort of thing. So I guess it's very difficult. It's almost like, um, I have to wonder what's going to happen in the future if things continue in this way, because as it does turn out, I mean, if you have self-control, then um, you can preserve yourself. Um, you can prevent yourself from being controlled. But if you don't have self-control, then you are you're sort of like an animal, and you can be domesticated, and you can be abused, and you can be manipulated, because you'll always do whatever's easiest, or you'll do what's comfortable or whatever. And so all you have to do is, show that person the easy path. And even if that's bad for them in the end, they're going to take the easy path. So I guess I have to wonder, what the future will be like, um, if something like, because there are people in the West who kind of look at Islam, and I think there are people in the Islamic world who also feel this way, that um, they have a sense that Islam is, as a religion and as a I think the term is ummah, like a community of Muslims,
Mm-hmm.
that as, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Spangler. um, Spangler, and then you have Toynbee, and you have these theorists who talk about the decline of the West,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they look at different cultures as kind of organisms, and they say that every organism has a life cycle. So a
Mm-hmm.
civilization is born, it has a high point, and then it has a low point, and then it sort of dies off or subsides. And I guess a lot of people are wondering if Islam is going to be, um, the new new organism that replaces what we have in the West right now, which is kind of a mix of a secularized version of Christianity and then a more aggressive, just secularism, atheism, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have done a little bit of research into like geopolitics, and people like Gaddafi um, were interesting because Gaddafi would make predictions about um, the idea that Europe is going to become Muslim. This is before the recent migration that we've had into Europe, where you've had a significant number of millions of people moving to Europe from Muslim majority countries. Um, so a lot of these kind of feelings that people have, it's interesting. It's also interesting to me when I see, like we've discussed, when I see Islamic countries that seem to be westernizing or that seem to be liberalizing,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard for people to see because they have, especially in the West, they have a very black and white view of all Muslim countries are the same. All Muslim countries are like, it's a black and white, like
Yeah.
Sharia law is like the most extreme. Everyone's getting beheaded, everyone's getting thrown off building, like the most extreme corporal. Which, I mean, we have capital punishment in America. We kill people for certain crimes, but there's a very like a black and white thinking about it. But I know Saudi Arabia has been liberalizing
Oh yeah.
certain media laws and certain laws about the freedom of women, and I know that Iran has a. If we talk about fertility, like the size of families, like Iran has like 1.7 children per woman or something like that. So I guess there's two trends that are going on in my head. On the one hand, I see Islam entering into the West and growing and kind of flourishing because it has this strong foundation. But on the other hand, I see Muslim countries that are westernizing. And I wonder,
Yeah.
from my perspective, of course, if you're coming from an Islamic perspective, then you would internally feel like, yeah, Islam will continue to grow and flourish. But from the Western perspective, you're wondering, is that going to happen, or is the Islamic world going to secularize and liberalize, and are we going to get more globalized in that sense, or whatever the term is, especially with things like the internet, which really changes the dynamic. You have so many people speaking English as
Mm-hmm.
this global language,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so much of American culture gets exported. I think that's the biggest American export is culture, not
Yeah. Wow, that's very true.
not like anything physical.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to some different countries, and they play American music and they listen to American music, and it's interesting because they view that as oftentimes they view that as higher. Like American fashion is higher, American movies are higher. Um, but then I'm listening to the American music that is popular, and I'm like, this is not the best thing America has done, or this is not really necessarily what I would point to, and I would say, oh yeah, this is great. This is what I want to spread to the whole world. So it's a weird situation to be. There's a difference, I think, between America as an idea that people look at, which is constantly changing, and then there's like people who actually live in America, and the 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 distinction there between like American people who live in America and American culture and American media, because so much of it is concentrated in very small hands. So like Hollywood or New York City or something like this, these are very small points of America. Yes, millions of people might live in these big cities, but the amount of people who actually produce the music or who decides, what gets on the radio or what gets on the TV, what movie is going to be on the screen, what's popular, what's in advertising, these sort of things. There's I often think, I mean, I guess this is conspiratorial, but I think that a lot of what we perceive as popular isn't necessarily what is determined to be popular. I mean, just because it is popular doesn't mean it had to be popular. I think sometimes
Mm-hmm.
feel that if something's popular, it was inevitable. But I think there are many cases in which something is popular because it has been pushed to be popular, and people sort of accept it as popular because they think other people like it, and it starts a
Yeah.
sort of a chain reaction in that way.
Oh,
Um,
I think it's definitely the latter.
yeah, I guess I just see so much change happening that
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that. I don't know. I don't know what the future will be like. I know in America, the statistics say something like, 1 out of 4 Americans identifies as LGBT or something in the younger generations, like teenagers. And I look at that and I think, when I was a kid, I guess I was sheltered because I didn't even know. I had to learn what the word gay meant. Like, I think I was like 7 or 9 years old or something. I had to learn. It wasn't intuitive to me. It wasn't around me. I knew what marriage was. I knew male and female, boyfriend, girlfriend. I knew what that was long, long before I ever knew about, gay marriage
Mm-hmm.
or gay relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I think is being introduced um, as like a majority of the culture. And I just see those kind of changes. And even in America, I know Obama did not support gay marriage when he became president in 2008. And now it's like if you don't support gay marriage, you're like extreme right wing Republican conservative. So just so much has changed. It's been 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
Um, and so much has changed. So I don't know how things are going to evolve from here. Is there a limit to what people can handle,
Mm-hmm.
um, and what people see? I think there are a lot
Yeah.
of people who hear the message that you're talking about, and they would like to be part of that community, but
Yeah.
a very they have a very strong sense of identity and a feeling like they I don't know, like they in there's almost an intergenerational sort of a thing where it's like you would like to be connected with older generations. You want to be connected in that way. It's hard because music keeps changing in a way that didn't happen before. The whole, you had like the Beatles and Elvis. I guess this is like the baby boomer generation. And now you have whatever electronic music, and you have all different kinds of music. So music is changing in a way that it didn't necessarily change before. I mean, in the West, music was what music was for a very long time, and the changes were not very dramatic. And now it's like if you listen to every generation kind of has its own like 80s music, 90s music, early
Yeah.
2000. I see sometimes YouTube comments that are like, "Oh man, 2013 was the best year ever. I wish I could go back." And it's like 2013 was 6 years ago. It's not like ancient history. How has so much changed since then? So, I guess people feel like they want to go back. They want to go back
Mm-hmm.
to something, but there's nothing really to go back to.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to see how that's going to play out, if people are going to start converting to Islam, or somehow find a new form of Christianity that is more restrictive or more um, submissive,
Yeah.
or what exactly is going to happen. But it's very difficult, I think, for people. I guess people need to feel like they have some authority,
Yeah.
and it's hard to, even if you realize that, it's hard to then make the leap of like, okay, I know I need to listen to somebody. I know I need some kind of like higher power, but at the same time, it's one thing feel that way, and then it's another thing to actually put that into practice and to make the connection. And there is a big, I think there is a big social element where people they want to feel like part of a group.
Oh yeah.
It's it's kind of, people want to be part of the mainstream, and to break out of that and do something different is very alienating. And I guess at this point I'm really rambling, which I sometimes do.
No, continue. Go ahead.
No, no, no. I could talk more about, like, in the West we have the concept of like the jock and the nerd and the goth kid and the emo kid and all of these different little cliques that we have. Because people fundamentally, they want to be part of something. They want to be part of a tribe, or they want to be part of a group. And so they find these little weird cultural zones to distinguish themselves as, hey, I'm part of a real culture. I care about this music. I care about this scene. This defines me. It depends how I'm going to dress this way, and I'm going to listen to this music, and I'm going to be with these people, and this is my group. And it's a way to feel that cohesion. It's a way to feel like you belong to something. And we can laugh about it. We can say, oh, that's so funny how these teenagers, they care so much about this superficial stuff. That doesn't matter. That maybe in 10 years they'll outgrow it. They'll get a real job. They're not going to, they'll put on a business suit and they won't care about that anymore. And I see the criticism there, but I also think there's something authentic when someone wants to put on a certain form of dress that signifies, hey, I'm part of a group. And, we have shared values, and we have something fundamental. And when you can make that, I guess, something that is not just a thing for teenagers, but you can make that something that you can grow old into, you can have a family and continue with that. That's something that I guess has become less accessible as people become more cynical about it. There's a lot of self-doubt. There is a feeling, I think, that people have, like, when you look at divorce rates, it's like, well, why bother getting married if we're just going to get divorced? What's the point of marriage? Especially for men, you're looking at it and you're like, wait, so we get divorced and then she just takes half of my money and has, so it's a very cynical, it's almost like a financial transaction rather than like a cultural union or a spiritual union or religious union. So there's all this cynicism, and I think there's an element where it's a self-defense mechanism because it hurts to feel lonely. So rather than actually allow that pain to happen and to do something different, it's more, what happens with people, I think, is that they make a joke out of it, or they make fun of it, or they'll kind of jump ahead of it. Like, they'll be like, oh yeah, everything sucks, I hate my life, like, I'm gonna kill myself. Like, people say these things in a very casual way, in a joking way, and we have a culture of extreme irony and sarcasm. And I guess there are other cultures that have those kind of dark humor. Historically, like, I know Russia has a history of having this very dark humor. And self-deprecating humor and things like that. It's a kind of self-defense mechanism. Like, I'm not going to be sad about my situation. I'm going to laugh about my situation. But then it's also, when you get into that, you're no longer capable of being genuine and being honest and actually looking at something seriously, because you've got your guard up, you've got your irony, you have your sarcasm. And you're not capable of, moving beyond to something solid and productive. So it's like you're in this watery zone where, on the one hand, nothing can hurt you, but on the other hand, you can't actually do anything. You don't have a foundation that you can push off of. Everything's just sort of swimming around, and that's I think where a lot of apathy and depression come from. When you don't take anything seriously, then I guess that's a coping mechanism people use. and then it's very hard to um, do something that is impactful, or to hold a promise even to yourself, like that aspect of self-control of like, I promise that I'm not going to eat meat for a whole month, or I'm not going to eat candy, or I'm not going to eat chocolate, or something like that. I think so many people, even if you said like you have to be serious about this, that's probably a reason why we have such a high level of obesity in America, or one of the
Yeah.
reasons is that people are not capable of following through on a promise to themselves, not even to other people, but to themselves. And that kind of seriousness where it's like a life and death struggle of like, no, I set out to do something, I'm determined to do it, I'm going to do it. There is a
Mhm.
kind of repression that you need there, or a kind of seriousness that you need, or something like that, to follow through on a promise. And that is, yeah, to repress the urge to sleep in for 5 more minutes, or to eat whatever you want. um, it's something that I think has a lot of economic reasons behind it. If we think about the structure of capitalism, it benefits wealthy people when people consume more. So this is why George W. Bush, after the 9/11 attacks, he said people need to go to the shopping mall and buy more things, which is like, we just had a tragedy. Shouldn't we be mourning? Shouldn't we be? And he said, no, we got to go buy more things to stimulate the economy. So there's a sense in which um, I think there is an economic incentive to promote the idea of being a consumer, to promote the idea of being an impulsive shopper, someone who takes out a loan, a credit card loan, to buy more toys, or to buy more whatever, to stimulate the economy. I think there's an economic incentive there,
Mm.
to promote this kind of personality. So religion is, in general, religion, I would say, is an obstacle to the neoliberal capitalist economic incentives that exist. And I mean, people can take that literally into a conspiracy, or you can just say, well, there are like these economic incentives, and people are just sort of following the incentives. But those are all of my thoughts. That I've completed my diatribe.
No, it is. It is really interesting. I think seeing like what trends will progress is going to be very interesting because I mean, as an Arab and as an American, like I mean, I'm both Middle Eastern and Western, like equally so, I would say. I think I see on one side like half of my family becoming like one half of my family becoming very like westernized as you like the trend that you see we're in the Middle East. And I think part of it is um by the way, have you ever taken like an anthropology course? It seems like you're very like anthropological in your approach.
I took like an intro to anthropology, but I guess I like studying different ethnicities and different cultures, and I like, I mean, linguistic theory I might not be the strongest on, but I like,
Mm-hmm.
looking at comparative. I've studied different languages, so I like comparative linguistics, and I like being able
Yeah.
to look at different etymologies and different cultural groups, and say like, oh, this is how I like history of religion, which is, I guess, it makes it sort of difficult for me to take religions as seriously as I might otherwise take them.